So hey. All right, thank you for sticking it out, because there's me and then there's the amazing Josh Clark, right? We can't miss Josh. And we're at Disney World. It's one of my favorite places. Disney World, Disneyland, I'm a Disney girl. So let's dive right into this, shall we? I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I dive into the full thing. In 1998, I graduated with a metal sculpture degree and immediately realized I needed to get a job and one that paid. So I taught myself how to code and design websites. Taught myself with Adobe Classroom in a book and BB Edit way back in the day. So it was cool. And it actually opened the door. So I worked for a little film and video company, and they did great big projects for clients like the Olympics and Pan Am Games. But I was a production assistant. And so I had a lot of downtime. So that's why I decided to design and code their website. And that opened a whole bunch of doors in what would become my career, basically as a web designer. Over the course of the years, I was doing both code and design, and then I decided I really loved the design aspect more. And so I kind of went down that road a little bit further. I hear a lot of poofing from the mic. Sorry about that. Is it still okay? All right. All right, I'll try not to poof into the mic. All right. And so yeah. I taught myself these skills. I loved it. It was a career that my heart was happy when I was making websites. And I kind of followed my heart all along the way, from one job to another, and eventually kind of ruling out code and taking on only design, and then growing into management in some capacity or other. And I was out in the San Francisco .com, the first .com startup days in the web stuff, 1999, 2000, 2001. And I got a lot of really great work experience, life experience, really fast at a very high speed. And then when the economy started to shift, I ended up going back to UNLV, which is where I got my metal sculpture degree. And while I was there, I went back as a senior web designer. And while I was there, I was asked to teach courses. So I started teaching in management information systems because I knew how to use computers and I could figure that out. And then my old department, where I got my metal sculpture degree, heard that I was teaching in management information systems and said, hey, come back, teach over here. We need somebody with computer skills in the art department. We need an interface design course. So this was a golden opportunity for me because I had graduated from this department and there were all these skills that I'd wished I'd had as an artist, going out into the world after graduating with an art degree, all these skills that I wish that I had that I didn't get in my curriculum. So I was like, okay, now's my opportunity. I get to teach. I get to design my own curriculum, and now I can bring all those things that I wish that I'd had into my curriculum. And so I thought, wow, this is awesome. I totally want to do it. I did it, and it became awesome. And so where I started was I created these 2 rules. So my designers were going to have 2 rules. And we're going to start the first day with them. And the very first rule was kill your darlings. Because something that I had learned being out there in the world, in the real world, was that I could pour all my heart and my passion and my love for what I was doing into my work, and the client could very easily hate everything I did and kill it. And I had to be able to let go of what I had created. And I learned that through sort of some frustration, right? It's really painful if you can't let go. You become very attached and you become very challenging for your clients to work with when you can't let go. So this was my first rule of design, was be able to kill your darlings. First rule, you learn this, you'll be all right. Build up a tough skin, right? And so then there was the second rule, which was sell your shit. And as a 28-year-old designer, teacher, I was a little more terse in my language. I thought it had more dramatic impact to be like, sell your shit. It's memorable, to say the least, right? But selling your shit is about being able to communicate your ideas. And what I've learned over the course of 18, 20 years, 20 years really, as a designer through various iterations and various roles, is that the better you are at selling your shit, the fewer babies you have to kill, darlings you have to kill. So if you get really good at this, it's amazing. It's amazing. Communication is sort of the foundation of this little pyramid. I like this pyramid here. Communication is the foundation for these things. It builds this really nice underlying structure for understanding. When there's understanding between you and your clients, or you and whoever you're communicating with, there's mutual understanding and things are good. You have clarity of vision on the direction that you're trying to go in. And when there's clarity of vision, that gives you mutual confidence. And confidence is a two-way street. So confidence is not only, them believing in you to get the job done, but you believing in them and their ability to communicate what they need to you, right? That's so important. And then if you get that level of confidence in each other, you establish trust. At the top of the pyramid is trust, and trust, when you have trust, the trust of the people that you are working with, you have freedom, and freedom is amazing. It's amazing. So, with communication, I just feel like this is the crucial, if there is an art to selling your ideas, to selling your work, the answer is communication. And if there are any skills that you can really put some focus on, and I believe in all of the skills, we've learned some amazing stuff here at this conference, amazing stuff. But communication is one that I can't put enough emphasis on, no matter how fast I was at Photoshop or how good I was at whatever it was I was working on. Communication was the one that tended to set me apart. It helped me move further, farther, faster. So let's talk about context a little bit. So in all of the different roles, and Jeffrey mentioned a couple when he introduced me, but designer, developer, coder, I've been a partner, I've been an employee, I've been a product over products with just customers and not necessarily clients. So, all kinds of different contexts. But I'd realized that as I had all of these sort of frustrations along the way, and all of these situations where I had to, kill my darlings and try to sell my ideas and it wasn't working out. Well, these were the contexts, right? Me, team coworkers, me, departments bosses, me, clients and customers. And what I realized at one point was that instead of being concerned about what I would do if I were them, because there was a point in time where I was very concerned with, well, if I were them, if I were in that position, this is what I would do differently. This is how I would handle it. Well, instead of being concerned with what I would do if I were them, I learned that I needed to be more concerned with what I will do as me. And so I came up with these 12 check yourself checkpoints, because me, was the common denominator in all of these relationships. And I can't always control what somebody else is doing or what they're going to do. I can shape it, I can design it, but I can't always control it. But I can control me. I am the common denominator. So these are my checkpoints. These are the things that if I'm starting to feel frustrated or any sort of I'm feeling micromanaged, I'm feeling some sort of tension in the project, if I look at these things, these are things I've learned the hard way, fumbling forward in life, that if I can save you any time or hassle, if there had been a handbook of these things when I were going through school, it would have made my last 20 years so much more pleasant. But anyway, so a lot of them seem like common sense, and we're going to just rattle right through them. But if they were common sense and we were actually doing all of them, I would have been out of work a long time ago. So, all right. So let's look at the first one. And if you saw Dan Mall's talk yesterday, I think he and I have a lot of good crossover in designing communication and human relationships, and how some of the best stuff is not in Photoshop, right? You can design your scope of work. Every point of contact that a human being has with you, you can design it, whether you're a designer or not. But those of you who are designers, I want to put a little bit more pressure on you that you have more responsibility to be designing those interactions that people have with you. Whether it's an email or a phone call or a meeting that you set up, a meeting that someone else sets up with you and you haven't made sure that it's efficient. Emails are a great example, because I think if you're looking for a place to start on how I can improve my communication design, start with email. I've looked at a lot of designers' work, including my own, And something that I see is some common things is like a big block of text explaining whatever the situation. Something that we can do very simply is break it out. Put some bolded headers, and instead of long, rambling sentences, not to imply that any of you do that, but I certainly did, I would say a thing, and then I would say the same thing again in like the next sentence, but slightly different words. I did that a lot, just saying. But you can simplify it. Think bullet points. Think scannability and digestibility of your messaging. Start with emails. Are you being as efficient as you can? You save time when you do that. Another one is be specific immediately. And this is one, again, I love the reference of emails because this is one that as many times as I've talked about it in the past, 6 months, I did a blog post on this, but I see it no less than once a week, no less. I'll be CC'd on an email exchange, and the specific example that I think is classic for getting specific immediately is scheduling things. Imagine scheduling an email, or scheduling a meeting. Somebody emails you, hey, do you have time to meet later this week? And it takes 6 emails to get to the end of this exchange, right? It's like, hey, do you have time to meet later this week? Sure, I have time to meet. What's good for you? Anytime, And then they email back and they're like, oh yeah, Tuesday or Thursday. And you're like, okay, yeah, how about 2 o'clock on Tuesday? And then they're like, yeah, Tuesday at 2 o'clock is perfect. I'll talk to you then. And then you're like, oh shoot, what time zone? And then you're like, oh, are we doing Skype video or phone? It's like this ongoing conversation, and it's every email that is gone back and forth is an interruption of time and flow in your day and in your schedule, because you're kind of waiting for that email and that closure of the loop of the conversation, but it just kind of keeps dragging out on and on and on. If you get specific immediately, if you're the one initiating, hey, let's have a meeting this week, start it with your availability. It can be one, date and time zone. Hey, I need to meet with you. Are you available on Tuesday at 2 o'clock East Coast time? Also a time zone note, if you want to be especially clever, a lot of people put EST or EDT. Making sure you're in the right daylight time or standard time is a particularly nice detail to have correct. A lot of people just do EST or PST all the time, but right now, for example, we're in daylight savings time still, so it would be EDT, just a little one of those sort of editorial notes. But simplify, right? So if you start the conversation with when you're available, date and time, you give them immediately a time window to focus on. Take that time out of your day to look at your calendar and make sure you're communicating what your availability is or when you want to actually have that call or that meeting. And then they can respond in kind. If they're not available, maybe you've given them some options, 2 or 3 options. I like options. Some people don't do options. It's all right. Your preference. At least be specific right away. Always include the time zone. Always include the format of the call. Have you ever gotten that where you get to the end of the call or the end of the exchange and they're like, you arrive at the meeting date and time and you're like, I don't know who's calling who. Are they supposed to call me or am I supposed to call them? I've been in that situation so many times and it drives me bonkers. So I've tried to work through that over the years and get better at it and be the one that is saying, hey, let's do this at this date and time. I will call you at this number. And it'll be a Skype video call or whatever it is. But reestablish all of that. It can be a 3 email exchange instead of 6. Very, very simple. Another one is word choices. I like the example of Yoda. Yoda says do or do not, there is no try. It's a great example because do or do not, those are words with active intent behind them. Try is more of a passive intent. It's like, maybe I'll get around to it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. You're allowing some room for failure there. I've had the argument when I've given this talk before of people who are like, well, if you don't try, then there's no opportunity for failure. You have to try. I get it. I understand it. And we're kind of talking about little nuances in the conversation, the actual effort. But I believe psychologically, and there is evidence behind this, but psychologically, active intent will reinforce action greater than passive intent. Do the thing or don't do the thing. Don't think about it. Another word choice thing that I would love to see people eliminate from their language is the word just. How many times have you been asked, oh, just move it over 10 pixels? Oh, just redo the whole color blue, whatever. You're being asked, and they say it. Usually it is said, or we say it, and it's not intentionally demeaning, but it sort of is demeaning. It's one of those words that kind of like belittles what the effort is on the other side of that sentence, right? And so if we can spin that to a more positive thing, like, can you do the thing? You know, don't put the word just in there. If you're using the word just, next time you write an email, next time you write a thing, look for the word just in your writing. See how many times it shows up. And then remove it, unless you're saying, like, the superhero is fighting for a just cause. Like, that's an okay example of using the word just. But, you know, just move it over. Just make the logo bigger. We don't have to use it. It's actually a completely pointless word. So word choices, our ability to use more positive words, is an opportunity for people to engage with us in a more positive way. They don't always have a clear understanding of why it's important or why they enjoy working with you. But that positivity and this framing makes it better to work with you. And something about that sticks. And people are like, yeah, this is a nice experience. This is all right. So another quick example of word choices. I used to work in a fairly large organization, and I was like middle management, and there was a co-middle manager who would always use terms like, ideas should come from the bottom up, and we need to educate them on how to work with us. And those sorts of terms just kind of rubbed me wrong. For whatever reason, I was always like, why? Why do we have to say the bottom up, like we're above them? Like, I don't think it was ever intentionally like, oh, we're above. You know, ideas should come from the bottom up, and then we decide what happens with them. But that's how it always came off, and I always felt like, isn't there a better way to say that? You know, ideas should come from everywhere. Maybe we change the phrasing to ideas should come from everywhere, not ideas should come from the bottom up. I realize the intent. But there are little things like that that change the experience of perception of what it's like to work with you. And the more positive, the better. Word choices. Speak with confidence. So this is sort of an interesting one too that relates to that passive language thing. So in effort to be really kind and nice, I often come off very passively. And I didn't know this until a coworker had pointed it out to me at one point in my career. I was like, you know, when you write an email, you have a lot of really good information in there, but it gets blown off by our team leaders because you kind of sound wishy-washy about it. And I was like, I do? I had no idea. You know, but then somebody else would make the exact same suggestion with different word choices and different confidence levels than I had. And the idea would totally be taken in, and I'd just be like, well, I just said the same, what? And I didn't really understand that it was about those words that I used and the lack of confidence that some of those words seemed to project with people. So stuff that I would, here's an example sentence. I would say, I think it could definitely help if we da-da-da-da-da. Instead of saying, I think it could definitely help if, I could just say, this will help. A lot more confident, right? Like, it just is. So this was a thing that I had to work through. It was a thing that I was always on like one side or the other. I was like, I would try to be nice, and I come off really wishy-washy. And then I go completely the opposite, and there's a really fine line, and you learn this kind of by messing up too, you can. There's a really fine line between being confident and being cocky, or being a jerk. And I learned this kind of the hard way too. Early on in my career, I was at a .com. I mentioned that already. But the .com, we were seeing all these layoffs, right? It was like that time in the .com economy, 1999, 2000. Things were starting to kind of go on the downslide, and we were having a really critical all-hands meeting. And the CEO was up there, and he's laying it out on the line. Now, I was a production artist at the time, moving up in the ranks, and I would hear what the buzz around the company, the concerns of people, and I'm at this meeting and nobody's speaking up. Nobody's saying what they really think, and I'm thinking, why aren't these people speaking up? And I stand up at the end when there's the opportunity for questions, and I'm like, all right, CEO. Like, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I do remember his reaction. And I was a jerk. I can just say that, like, I was speaking my mind, and I tended to write it off as, like, I was raised by a Marine, and this is just how I am. I say it like it is. And, really what happened was, whatever I said, his response was, leave it to brass tacks Newberry to bring up that. And I was just like, oh, crap. Like, it didn't strike me immediately, but it was one of those things that resonated with me over time. I was like, that's not really the best, most positive response that you could get from somebody, especially the CEO, when you want your voice to be heard. If you want your voice to be heard, find a diplomatic way of saying whatever it is you've got to say. And I'm not saying sugarcoat it. I don't believe in sugarcoating things. I do believe in being direct and being honest, but you can be direct and honest without being a jerk. I do believe that. It's taken me a lot of time to figure out what that balance is, but it comes with practice. Oh, wait, one more thing about don't being a jerk. Yeah, one thing about don't be a jerk. A really great, useful tip for not being a jerk is to separate the person from the action. And this is actually crucial. I almost missed that for you guys. You added code to the code base last night. It broke the build. So now we have to redo everything. So instead of saying you added code that broke the build, we could just say there was code added to the build. It's broken. We have to fix it. That's just an example of how. And I do a lot of native app. I work with a lot of native app developers. Hence some of these references with code base and breaking builds and stuff. But that's an example of, like, separate the person from the action. When you're going to call somebody out on something, try not to make it a personal attack. Be two people or a group of people having a civilized conversation about a problem or a thing. Separate the person from the thing. It's really, really, really helpful. Okay, now let's don't be judgy. So being judgy, here's a great story that I had where I was working with a very large, traditional sort of company, corporate. I try to keep it quiet because I have a lot of NDA work under my belt where I can't talk about specifics. But so here's one though. I'm working with like a massive entity of a corporate entity. And my direct contact is a VP of his department of tech. And like as a young designer, I was kind of, I don't know, judgmental. Any of us ever been judgmental? I just watched the code video and there was like the term programmers and, nerds. Like we have all these labels and compartments that we place people in. And sometimes as like a young punk designer, like this was a thing that I did. And I met this person who was my client. He's in the like khakis and a nice polo shirt. And I'm like, oh, I got to work with Corporate Bob. I labeled him Corporate Bob. I'm not entirely proud of this, but I did. And it's a thing we do sometimes, programmer. Like, it's a thing that we do. And so we're having this meeting, right? We're having this meeting, and Corporate Bob says, like, he's trying to communicate a thing. I think I understand. He doesn't think I understand. And I said, I'll take it back. We'll work with the designer. We'll put some Photoshop mock-ups together, and we'll send them your way, and you can let us know and give us feedback there, because sometimes that's easier, right? And he goes, I've been known to sling a little Photoshop, and like my guts fell. I was like, step away from the Photoshop. Don't touch. You'll hurt someone. Our job, not yours, Corporate Bob. When I got back to my desk about an hour later, there was a little Photoshop file waiting for me in my email box. And that Photoshop file actually spoke 1,000 words of description that he couldn't communicate verbally in a way that I was actually understanding. But when I looked at it, I opened my little box and I saw this image and I went, oh, that's what he meant. That's what he meant. I guess you can sling a little Photoshop. Well, like what I learned with that though was like, give people the space to communicate. You may have labeled them in a certain way, but maybe they are more than what you perceive. Maybe they have more information to give. Don't be judgy. Give them a shot. Listen more, judge less. My valuable learning skill. All right, so another one that I have is accept responsibility. And this is not, like, this is sort of a funny thing as a, as a company owner. So I still am a COO for Martian Craft, which is an app dev and design shop, consulting basically. We do native apps, iOS, and training, and Android. And sometimes things break. Database, we broke a database recently. I'm not saying accept responsibility or blame for everything. That can violate some of your legal agreements, and you don't want to put your founders or your legal team in the position of having to fight for words that you accidentally claimed responsibility for when, anyway. All right, so what I mean with this, what I mean with accept responsibility is look for opportunities to be proactively responsible. And what I mean by proactively responsible is maybe somebody says to you, hey, we should meet later this week about that thing. And then, like, how many times has that happened? And then that meeting never happens. Like, they never come back to you. They never follow up with you. And so you're like, well, I guess they got busy, or it wasn't that important because they never followed up with me and we never had that meeting. And then, like, 2 weeks go by and they're like, shit, we were supposed to meet. I forgot. I never scheduled that. If we were taking the opportunity to be proactively responsible, we could have followed up with them. They say it on Monday, for example. We should meet later this week. If you're being proactively responsible, you can follow up when you haven't heard from them by Wednesday. I know we're all busy, but watch for those little opportunities to seize moments like that and say, hey, you mentioned that we wanted to meet. Do you still want to do that? I am available. We learned this one early on. I am available this day, this day, this day, and this time, this time, this time. Pacific Coast, right? Like, take those opportunities to pick up things off of their plate that make their life easier. Be proactively responsible. Pick up more stuff. And again, it's one of those things that they don't always register, like what it is about working with you that just made their life easier, but it was something. And damn, I want to work with you again. It's important. Those little opportunities, and it's usually the small stuff. The stuff like that, like picking up the responsibility of organizing a call or a meeting. Little things like that make a huge difference because you just saved them some time. Little things are huge. Another one is silence. Now, I work with a lot of developers who are great at silence. Designers are also great at silence. I'm great at silence, believe it or not. I'm great at silence too. I get into these little things where I'm like, I just need silent. I need to focus, heads down. I need to get the work done. I need you to not bother me. Communicate that. It's okay to actually be silent, but you have to let them know and you have to set expectations. Man. So here's what happens when you don't communicate the expectation that you need some downtime or that you will be away for a certain amount of time, is that you create these gaps of mystery. And whoever this, say it's a client relationship, right? So they're like, okay, you go make the thing. And then you're like, all right, awesome. But nobody's really said, it's just like maybe like, I'll have a checkpoint on Thursday is the milestone. But nobody said like what time on Thursday or anything like that, right? So you're just like, Thursday. I know I have to get it to Thursday. Now, a designer, usually Thursday means 11:59 p.m., your time zone, because it's still Thursday. A client is thinking 3 p.m., their time zone. So if we don't communicate that specific little detail, we create this gap. And like an example for me, when I used to run an animation shop, I had a team of animators and web designers working on things, and I was the face that had to talk to the clients. And so my rule with my guys, we had pretty flexible time. My rule with my guys was, if I haven't heard from you by 10 a.m., I assume you're dead, and I make other plans, because my face is on the line here. I have to answer to these clients about where the progress is and what the status of the thing is. And if I haven't heard from you, I got to keep moving. I'm sorry, but I know it sounds really, really hollow, but I do care that they're all right. But I got to keep this project moving because, you know, personal stuff. Clients don't always care. They're paying you good money for this stuff. So if you go quiet, you create a gap. And my example there was to say that when you leave a gap unfilled, they fill it with stuff, and what they fill it with is never, ever a positive thing. My example, I assume you're dead. I make other plans. That's very extreme, but that's the kind of stuff that would go through my mind. Imagine what's going through your client's mind. Well, they must be working on something else. I also have Martian Craft is a 100% remote company, and we're working with remote people. There are a lot of gaps there. You've got to set really specific details. Here's what's going to happen. Here's when you can expect things. And if you're going to miss that timeline, adjust the expectation, but don't miss it again, okay? Like, it's really important. It's really important. Set the expectation, follow through. All right, so, man, I just want to make sure that I didn't leave anything here unsaid with silence. Silence, yeah. All right, so follow up. Here's a great one that recently I had a client that signed a really nice contract with us, and at some point in passing, this client said to me, we were competing against Agency X, who I have a lot of friends at Agency X, right? And we compete on a lot of similar projects. This happens a lot in the agency world, right? And so we were competing against this, and I was like, well, what made the difference? What was the difference? Because we have a lot of fantastically similar people, skills and offerings and all of these things. So we're looking at apples and apples here. What was the difference? And he said, well, you followed up with us during the pitch process. Like, we'd never heard back from them. Like, I heard back, but it was like 8 days later. You guys were on it. You responded. You were really, really there. And, following up, he said, if they were like that during the pitch process, what were we going to feel like during the project? We felt neglected and alone during the pitch process? That's not a good sign. So following up also is about keeping your clients. Like, making the sell at one point is only like half of the equation. Keeping clients is part of the equation too. Following up is really key. Whether you're following up during a pitch process, you did a project 2 years ago and you want to make sure everything's going all right for somebody, reach out to them, find out where they're at. If you worked with somebody and you enjoyed working with that person, reach out to them, follow up, find out what they're doing now. They may have a lot of work for you. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, this is a key one, and I was really surprised to hear that from this guy who signed with us, because I didn't think about our proactive follow-up as something any different than what anybody else would do. But it turned out it was the thing that closed the deal. Are you guys following up? Everybody following up? All right. Just a quick check-in with everybody. Everybody awake out there? All right. You guys all ready for Disney later? All right. Anybody going out to Disney later? Yes, Epcot. I think if you have the magic band, you got some Epcot. All right. I just had to check in with you all. Just had to check in, make sure we're all awake. It's kind of hard to see with all the lights here, but we want to make sure we got some energy. All right. So the last two, I'm going to ramble a little bit. We have 10, 11, and 12, so last three. I'm going to ramble a little bit because these ones start to get touchy-feely here. So this one, meet them where they're at. Now, this is a big, important one for me, and I'll start it with a little story on how I kind of learned this lesson. So in like 2005, I was a partner at a web agency, web interaction agency, and I was working with a construction company. And the CEO of the construction company, awesome lady, she and I had been working through the whole process together, one-on-one, very cool. And we reached the point where I needed content from them. And I knew they had a lot of content. We needed to do a bunch of information architecture and stuff like that. And so she was going to have her assistant send us all of the content. They had everything in Word documents, and they were going to send it over. And so cool. So I leave the meeting, I go back to my office, and then like the next day I come in, and our office manager's like, "What did you tell her to send?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "The fax machine hasn't stopped running for like 20 hours. So they faxed their content to us. 2005. You would think like, whoa, who faxes content? I would have never taken a digital copy of something and printing it and then sending it via fax that we would have to then retype and put. Anyway, like my mind was like, wow, what a huge disconnect. And we all kind of laughed and joked, and we were kind of like, oh my gosh. And somebody says, oh, stupid client. And I thought, oh, not stupid client, not stupid client, stupid me. Like, how did I let that go? To the point where we wasted a bunch of time and paper. Why did I not ask more questions? Why did I not understand this client was at this level before we got here? I know it sounds small and sort of insignificant to say, like, oh, well, it's a fax, no big deal. But there were like 500 pages sitting on the floor here, and they were still coming, you know? And like, if we're not paying enough attention to catch something like that, we got bigger problems, I think. We're not asking the right questions up front. We're not making sure that they're taken care of in the way that they need to be taken care of. We're not listening. At some point, something is broken. We missed something. We are failing them. So it really caused me to shift how I was asking questions up front, how I was learning about them, how they learned about us, why they wanted to work with us, asking all of those sorts of questions that gave us the meat of understanding to be able to reach them in the way that they needed to be reached. Communication is so key, so key. All right, here we go. I'm like, love what you do. Okay, this sounds super cheesy, right? Of course, Jaimee, love what you do. But like, I have been through a lot of different ups and downs in my career. We all have, I'm sure. You know, but the one thing that I feel like has sort of threaded through every decision I've made, from being a designer and like leaving code behind and deciding to focus here and then shifting into the people side of things, is my love for what I do. And Derek made a MasterChef reference, and I told him, I was like, I have a MasterChef reference too. Because I love MasterChef, I'm a huge fan of the show. And something that is amazing to me in MasterChef is sometimes they get one of those challenges, right? Like where the person wins a challenge, and if you haven't seen MasterChef, just bear with me here, but a person will win a challenge, and then they get to decide the fate of those who have to compete, you know, on the ground. They get to compete, and they get to decide, they're gonna cook with, I'm gonna give this guy the worst, the hardest ingredient to work with, and he has to cook something great with it. And that's my biggest enemy, right? And in the competition. And so what I do is I give him the hardest ingredient, he has to try to work with it. And then that guy gets frustrated. He's like, oh, that person is against me, he's out to get me. And then he's angry, and he cooks, and he's angry. And what he makes, the feedback he always gets from the chef, from Chef Gordon Ramsay, is, you know, you gotta learn to control your feelings. You gotta learn to like love what you're making, even when all the things going on around you are crazy. When somebody's out to get you or whatever, you gotta learn to love the craft, to love what you do, because it comes out in your food. We're no different. The stuff that we make, what we're feeling in what we make, it comes out. We ooze. Whatever we're feeling, it comes out in our work. And if we don't love what we're doing, I guarantee it's coming out in your work. And so it's important that if you're not loving it, to really examine and explore your other options and opportunities. One thing I have loved about the career that I've had is it's been pretty easy to kind of navigate different areas of it. You know, like going from code to design to management to people to back to design. Jeffrey mentioned that in his opening talk the other day, that you've been kind of out of the design game for a while, and now he's back and he's doing it again. There's so many opportunities to shift what we do and continue to love it. Even if we hit burnout, even if we hit these horrible road bumps or really frustrating experiences, we can love what we do, and it comes out in our work. And that, as a selling point for me, has been crucial. People feel the passion that I feel about what I'm doing. People talk to me and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that is exciting. And you know, like, I can't help but to be excited about what I do. Jeffrey also mentioned that I'm doing this picture, this clothing thing. We just launched that. It was a side project. And like, I get to work with kid art. Like, oh, it's so cool. You know, like, I can't help but to love the things that I'm working on. And I feel lucky about that. I don't believe that we have to be doing stuff that we hate. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. Love what we do. It's important. It comes out. If you're gonna ooze, ooze good. who's good? So, all right, here's another one that kind of relates to this. This is my last little bullet point. But be you. Another one that you're like, okay, Jaimee, here we go again. But like, be you. And this is something that we talked about, apples to apples. And I referenced Jeffrey again. Jeffrey's gone back to doing his own thing. You've kind of always been doing your own thing, but you started a new thing. And what sets us apart? When we are doing things, we're a designer amongst designers or a developer amongst developers. What really sets us apart? Because in my career, one thing that has set me apart is being me. I'm a little bit different in some way or other, but I've been very, very humbled and very fortunate to have people all along my career that come back to me and say, what are you doing now? I'd really love to work with you. Like, that's crazy and cool. And so, you know, like maybe I'm at this agency or I'm doing this thing over here, and somebody that I worked with 10 years ago finds me on LinkedIn or whatever, and they're like, hey, what are you up to? I noticed you're doing this. Can you help I'm with this company now? Word of mouth for being me. It's really weird, but it's really awesome too. Like, that's a thing that's valuable and sometimes undersold. I think that, like, you know, if we amplify this into a company, for example, Martian Craft is a company that I work with, and some of the little elements that define them as a company, that attracted me to them as a company, were things like I used to refer people to them, right? I still do. I still refer people to them. But they would give me, they do this referral bonus program. And it doesn't matter if you work for them or you don't. They do a referral bonus program, which is really cool. They'll give you like a percentage of if they close the deal. You make an introduction, they close the deal. That makes them very unique. I have never had another company do that for me. I've had a lot of people do amazing gift baskets and stuff, and that's awesome. That's them. And Martian Craft does this thing. And, you know, like, that's a thing that makes them stand out. What are things that make you stand out? Maybe it is, you know, the gratitude. I mean, to me, gratitude is a huge one. Being grateful and telling clients and customers and coworkers that you love working with them. Don't lie. but like, honestly, if you do enjoy working with somebody, tell them. Find your unique piece. Find what makes you special and amplify it. I think, you know, again with Jeffrey, and this is like a little bit of a rant, and you know how crazy it is to have somebody who's been your idol for like, I've been his idol for like 10 years or more, and he's in the front row, holy crap. But Jeffrey is somebody who inspired me by what he did. You know, the godfather of web standards back in the day when there were no standards. You know, I started in 1998. There were some heydays there. There's some Wild West in there. And Jeffrey made a name for himself by being him. He's still doing that. He's still being him. And I love that. I admire that. And that's the kind of person I've learned from, you know? And it's just awesome to me. And there are a lot of people around that do that sort of thing. And those are the things that help you stand out. Those are the things that make you different. When you go to sell, being you is a huge part of that. Maybe the most important part of that. All right, so running back through this really quickly, communication. So communication. Of all the things that I talked about today, the art of the sell. Art of the sell is often about communicating ideas. It's about selling the work of your ideas or your coworkers. It's often about communicating ideas and things that, I gotta ask you this before we close out. Anybody ever feel like you're not heard? Like we just can't, like I'm not heard? Okay, nobody. Everybody feels heard? That's awesome. Because I went like 18 years of like really struggling to feel heard. And then like the last, well really like maybe 15 years of that. And then finally finding my stride through all these fumblings and realizing that, again, going back to those two rules, right? The kill your darlings and the sell your shit. That the better I got at selling my shit, there were 3 things that happened that were pretty amazing. I come from an agency background where we used to pitch 3 designs to every client. Does anybody do that sort of thing? You work up like multiple designs? I see at least one hand out there. So like this is a pretty common thing, but what I learned is when you know how to sell your shit, I no longer, like 10 years ago, I learned that from this guy, Dave Gorham, that you don't have to do that. If you're actually listening to what their needs are and you're taking it all in, and you're able to sell it back to them, sell your work, you sell one idea. You don't have to sell 3 anymore and then Frankenstein those 3 together into something that you hate. You don't have to do that anymore. If you are really good at the communication piece, and these little things that I talked about today are steps forward in communication, by no means the end-all be-all, and maybe you're great at some of them, or all of them, and awesome if you are. It took me, seriously, 18 years to get good at, better at communication. I still have so much to do to get better. But communication, we build the foundation of understanding, which builds confidence, which creates trust. And again, with trust really is freedom. It's freedom. And when you have freedom in what you do, oh, you're gonna love what you do. You're gonna love it. All right, and then a quick little note, I just added this one in. After I gave this talk the last time, I had a lot of people say, oh, do you have any, like, can I get your slides? My slides are pretty much useless because they're like one word and a thing. But I made a little book, and it'll be done in about 2 weeks. I made a little book, which is basically, it's literally a pocket guide, fits in my pocket, of these points that you can reference very easily. It's like 35 pages. It'll be available on martiancraft.com in about 2 weeks if you're interested. And yeah, super simple, super cheap, and I don't price it, but we'll let you know. But if you are interested in these tips and circulating them around, or reading a little bit further into each point with some examples, it will be here. And with that, I'm going to give you a big thank you for listening, for being here, and so much gratitude. Thank you.